Good evening. I'm Jim Zirin. You're watching The Digital Age. Tonight, we have a serious discussion. How will war be conducted in the 21st century? Surely it will be conducted with guns and bullets and bombs, but it'll also be conducted over the internet, using websites and blogs, conducted by terrorists who use the internet for their own evil purposes. And our question tonight is, are we losing ground to the terrorists in cyberspace? And here to discuss that question with us is an expert in counterinsurgency. He is Colonel T.X. Hammes, who is a retired Marine Corps officer. T.X. Hammes has written an extraordinary book entitled The Sling and the Stone on War in the 21st Century. And T.X. Hammes, welcome. And I want to ask you this question. You wrote in the book about fourth generation warfare. Could you explain to our viewers what is fourth generation warfare and where will war in the 21st century, in your judgment, be fought?
All fourth generation warfare is a way of saying that war evolves, but not just with technology. And the Pentagon is fascinated with technology. But war really evolves out of the political, social, economic, and technical aspects of a society. And that's essentially the generations of war concept. Fourth generation war has seen us move away from state-on-state war to state versus non-state actor. Insurgencies, generally terrorism. And it is moved very much away from the military aspects. For instance, today terrorists really have no intention of defeating a power like the United States militarily, or the Soviet Union, or Israel. What they do plan to do is break the political will, so that without a military defeat, you will decide to withdraw from a conflict.
Now, do they use the internet to accomplish that?
The internet is, like for the terrorists or for insurgents, is much like for everybody else. It's a method of communicating, it's a method of getting your message out, it's a method for transacting business. It is a tremendously powerful medium that has allowed a much more global reach and global structure, not for individual, or not as a monolithic group. I don't believe there's any global terror organization. Al-Qaeda tries to do that, but they're not truly global. What you see is an alliance of local terrorists. It's a network of networks. Each local terrorist network or insurgent network has its own cause and own reason, but they can now tie together coordinated information globally.
Well, do they use the internet to attract adherents?
Yes. One of the things I think was significant is right after we went to Afghanistan to go after Al-Qaeda, we broke up Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and got them moving. They moved very heavily to the internet, and they now have persistent websites. They run education, they run recruiting, they they attract people. They
fundraising?
Certainly fundraising. One of the interesting aspects on fundraising is we've gotten pretty good at cutting down a lot of that through the charities and things. So they've actually moved more to real world crime. And this is one of the interesting things about fourth generation. One of the difficult things is there's a real merger between insurgent, criminal, opportunists, just a guy looking for a little bit of excitement. All of those blur together in an insurgency, and more so.
Well, they show criminal acts, do they not, on these websites? You could download a video of a beheading, or download a video of how to make a bomb, or the videos of suicide bombers at work.
Yes, they have all of those, and they use them.
It's rather blood-curdling what you can see on them.
Well, it depends upon whether you're them or us.
Yes.
If you're them, this is not an illegal act. It's a fulfillment of their philosophy, of their insurgency. Remember, the signing of the Declaration of Independence was an illegal act. And our forefathers were referred to as terrorists. And were, in fact, if we had lost that war, would have been executed for crimes.
Well, I think, was it Adams who said we all have to hang together or we'll hang separately? But I know that you're a student of the great Prussian general von Clausewitz, who was quoted all the time. And von Clausewitz said the commander has to understand what kind of war he's fighting. And he's very famous for that quotation. Do you think that our generals understand the kind of war that we're fighting in cyberspace?
I think we are getting better at it. We have now stood up some organizations that are operating there, but again, cyberspace is not necessarily military terrain. It is much like any complex aspect of society. You don't want military policing your cities. Well, remember, cyberspace is also the backbone of much of industry today. We've moved more and more to an information-based society. You don't really want the military trying to dominate and control that, because that's not what the military is trying to do. You need more of a policing agency. There is, in fact, a very loose association policing of the internet, and it is truly a leaderless network, which is interesting because as we're beginning to see warfare go to smaller and smaller groups with greater and greater power, there's less possibility the government will see them or intercept them before they conduct their act. The people who will have to do that will have to be friends, neighbors, all of society.
Well, that's very interesting because you certainly suggested in an article recently that you compared it to the Israeli experience where they actually knock anti-Israeli websites off the internet. What they call it, the cyber Hagana.
Yes,
and now you talk about I think it's a suggestion you made that perhaps private citizens in the United States could do the same thing and knock terrorist websites. There are at least over 100 that have been spawned in English off the internet.
There, last estimate I saw, there are roughly 5,000 websites that are Islamist and promote violence as
in
a way
English?
of achieving. No, not in English. And that's the problem, of course. Most of the real work is done in Arabic or other native languages, so it's a little more difficult for us to work on that. Israel has a very high percentage of people who do speak Arabic, and therefore you can pair the computer expert with a person who has cultural and language knowledge. That would be the ideal team to exploit such sites. And while they're highly classified, I'm fairly confident the U.S. government is doing something along that line. The cyber Haganah that you talked about, or the internet Haganah, Haganah was the name the Israelis gave for their defense forces before they were a state. So essentially a citizen militia protecting other citizens. And these are citizen volunteers that go after these anti-Israeli hate websites and take them off the air, deface them, change the argument. There would be, because there are so many of these popping up, there is the distinct potential for that type of action by the U.S. In fact, we just had Al-Qaeda call for a cyber jihad that is supposed to start on November 11th. By the time this program airs, we'll know what the results of that was.
We'll know whether there was or there wasn't. Now, what do they propose to do in the cyber jihad?
They are proposing simply to take down a lot of Western websites, anything you can take down. Now, that's a rather undirected attack, and of course, I'm not that concerned about it simply because the internet has been under attack almost since it first came into existence.
How do you take down a website?
I'm not sure. You'd have to talk to a computer expert.
Well, they all have to use some kind of internet service provider that...
Yes, you have to have access to the internet. There's different ways you can do it. You can use a brute force attack like Estonia, where they simply hammered them with so many emails from slave computers that they clogged essentially clogged the pipe. You couldn't get messages in or out because there were so many waiting to be dealt with. There are more subtle ones where you can alter the website, where you can change it, where you can redirect anybody who tries to access the website, gets redirected somewhere else. There are more subtle methods of attack.
And there are direct methods where you could actually attack the routers, isn't that right?
Physically
attack the router.
That would be much more difficult because that's a very broad attack. You don't know what you're taking down because, of course, the router doesn't handle any specific traffic. It handles traffic that comes its way from other routers. That physical vulnerability is something Richard Clarke wrote about in his book, Breakpoint, I think was the name of the book, where you physically attack the fiber optic cables where they enter or leave the United States. That's been discussed in open literature quite a bit. So there are different types of attacks. Obviously, we would not want any citizens doing physical attacks because you're also taking down our business, our industry. You might take down the fiber optic network that's providing the controls for New York City water or something like that. So physical attacks should be off the table.
Well, we have two private entities that have been identified, private persons, I suppose. One is Samir Khan, who is 21 years old. He is a Saudi who grew up in Queens, not far away. Now he lives somewhere in North Carolina. And he has a website which is certainly inflammatory, which is jihadist, and which tries to promote jihad and insurgency. Some very disturbing images and messages on his website. Now, the government, I think, has tried to take it down from time to time, or someone has, but it keeps cropping up somewhere else. It was identified that his internet service provider was in Texas. There was a complaint, they took it down, and it came up again in Jordan, and he's still on the internet. So you have that one side of the equation. Then you have someone named Joseph Shada, whom you may have heard of, who was in Boston, he's a Lebanese Christian, and he's taken it upon himself to identify jihadist websites, to contact the internet service provider, and to have him taken off the internet. Now, is that the kind of, you might style him an internet vigilante, is that the kind of private action that you're advocating?
He's not really a vigilante because he's not taking the action directly. He's appealing to the internet service provider to take him off the air. And that would remain, I would assume, completely legal. You're simply making a complaint about content on the net and asking the provider if he really wants that coming over his server.
Now, the government might have a problem taking Khan off the net. First, there may be a First Amendment issue. And second, they may want him there so they can observe and see who's logging onto the net, to the website, who's going on the blog, whom he's contacting, analyze what comes out of the website to see if it's a signal to attack or to organize. And now, what's your bottom line? Is it better to watch these people, or is it better to take them down?
Mostly when you're dealing with networks, it's best to observe and exploit if you can, to try to build a better view of the network. If it's just pure hate, then exploitation or taking it down, what I'd prefer to see is something like the lady in Montana, who, although she doesn't speak Arabic, she uses a Google translator to enter the chat rooms and just see who's in there, see what they're talking about, and then she passes the information along. That would be one method of doing this, and that would be even better if you can pair someone who's good at working the web with someone who has the cultural and language skills. We've got a lot of first-generation American Arabs who could help us with that, who have native proficiency skills, who may have grown up in those areas and therefore could pass more easily in the chat rooms and exploit them. When we see these nets moving around, like these websites moving around, essentially what he's done is got himself a friend who's, for lack of a better term, a geek, who can move this stuff around and understands it. I got to think that our geeks are better than their geeks, and I suspect we got more of them. If they take an interest in this, they could at least disrupt. One of the things that's most effective against a network is simply introduce distrust. It's hard to plan a terror cell if you think you're not certain you're the only people in the room who should be there. So the simple penetration and monitoring and passing data is actually more effective than actually taking the website down, because as a couple of these people get busted for people in their rooms, then everybody has to distrust anybody they meet in the room. And this begins to break up the global aspect of the network. Now, they'll go to the dark web with very closely controlled, and that would be a more sophisticated operation to find them there. Again,
what's a dark web?
It's one that you won't find any of these websites with search crawlers or anything else.
Oh, I couldn't go on Google and find the site.
They'll just disappear. I'm not even sure how you do portals. There's various ways to do portals to these. But again, this is where our geeks could find them, identify them, and exploit them.
Now, do we have sufficient Arab-speaking and Arab-fluent officers in our security forces, FBI and CIA?
No, not at all. And this is one of the strange things. We have got, one of America's great strengths is our diversity. We have got people from all over the world. You find almost any small or medium-sized city in the world, we've got somebody who grew up there, who speaks the language and knows the terrain. We have made almost no effort to exploit those people. We're beginning to now, something as simple as when we were first in Iraq, we would capture all these documents and couldn't translate them. Well, why didn't the unit that have them simply scan them on a flatbed scanner, send them back to a clearinghouse in the United States, and we farm them out to American Arabs and ask them for a translation?
Well, I guess because they don't have a security clearance. I mean, that highlights another problem we have.
Well, there's two problems there. One is thinking you need a security clearance for anything that's picked up. Something that's picked up tactically has a very short-term life, usually. And even if they translate it, they don't necessarily know where it is, and they would have to get back to those people. The other thing you can do is you send out 2 copies to 2 different translators. If they come back significantly different, you put one of your people that is fluent on it and see if one of the guys is lying to you. That may give you an indicator this guy, well, certainly he's not going to translate more documents for you, but if he's lying to you, there may be more than that to it.
So you're not the victim of disinformation?
Yes, because of the dual translation.
Now let's just move along for a moment to bioterror. Can the internet be an instrumentality of bioterror?
Only in that it's an instrumentality of all biological research. And I don't know if you're familiar with synthetic biology.
No, you'll have to tell me.
Synthetic biology, all it is you don't start with a bug or a virus or something like that. You actually start with base pairs. There's only 4 base pairs, but how they're arranged in the DNA tells you what the creature's going to be when it is formed. Dr. Venter, who sequenced the human genome about 3 years ago, created a phage, which is a virus that only attacks bacteria. And he created it from spare parts, DNA. Now, that is becoming cheaper and cheaper to do. Within 10 years, it'll be done by anybody in a good, well-equipped college laboratory will be able to do this. And there's going to be an explosion of incredible biological products as a result. We're already getting the first patents. But it also means you can create smallpox from scratch, or you could create the 1918 Spanish influenza from scratch. Their genomes are posted on the internet. We have actually, for smallpox, there's 200,000 base pairs of smallpox, but we have already created synthetic products with 300,000 base pair.
So let's just back up for a moment. I'm a terrorist and I want to start a smallpox epidemic in the United States. I can go on the internet and get base pairs for manufacturing the...
You have to have the knowledge. The first thing is you have to know what you're doing. So you have to have somebody who can do this. So you get a grad student or 2. And of course, a number of the 9/11 terrorists were grad students. Biological grad students, you can order the base pairs, a little bit of trouble paying for them because they're still fairly expensive. It would cost you probably $20,000 to $40,000 to buy the base pairs for smallpox.
But the price is coming down, isn't it?
Yes. Under Carlson's curve, does for base pairs what Moore's law does for computers. The price is halving very rapidly. Soon it'll be down about a penny a base pair, and you could do, soon being 5-6 years, you'd be able to do it for about $2,000. The equipment you need is under $5,000. The key problem with disseminating virus or any biological agent is, of course, the drying and dissemination. It's very tricky to get this stuff so it's viable when it's spread.
To weaponize it, in effect.
To weaponize it.
Yes.
If you choose not to weaponize it, but simply to give it to volunteers and let them be the weapons.
Yes.
And then scatter them around the world so you get simultaneous outbreaks, you could probably create a rather amazing attack. Certainly you would shut down world trade for a while because you'd have to sort out people who might be infected with smallpox would have to be quarantined before they could move. So airline travel, ship travel, etc., would have to be shut down. And
you'd have similar problems with any of the highly contagious diseases that could be weaponized. Now, our government hasn't just sat idly by while all these theoretical possibilities have arisen. We do, within the Department of Homeland Security, have, I guess, an assistant secretary for cybersecurity and communications. Are you on any of that as to what they're doing? I'm not sure what they're doing. Again, the actual cybersecurity of the net is taken care of more by industry. I mean, let's go back to generations of war for a minute. Third generation war, think World War II, is maneuver warfare or mechanized warfare, which requires the coordination of your air, ground, and sea forces. So it's joint warfare.
As you move to insurgency, you need just not the military forces, but your civilian aspects too. So it's an all-of-government response. Now, as we move into these super-empowered small groups, you need an all-of-society response. In other words, everybody's got to be involved. So if you're looking for a model that already does that, the defense of the internet is that. The defense of the internet uses a all-of-society defense that makes use of emergent intelligence theories. Emergence simply says if enough entities follow very simple rules, you can create very sophisticated structures. For instance, ants create anthills. Ants gather food. The queen is not the brain. There's no brain in an ant hive, and there's certainly no intelligence in ants. And yet they build enormously elaborate structures. And they respond in a cohesive fashion, very complex cohesive fashion. And yet as they study them, they find out that's really all about just following very simple rules.
It says in the Bible, go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise.
I didn't know
so
that.
it is a model.
If you take a look at that and you look at the internet, I don't know much about defense of the internet. I know nothing about viruses, but I follow some simple rules. I never turn the computer on, hook up to the internet unless my antiviral software package is running. I am set up so that it's always automatically updated. And nothing goes in the computer unless it goes through that system.
You have a firewall?
Yeah, I mean, about the package, one of the online packages from one of the online providers, which is viral, firewall, all those sorts of things. And that, so far, has been sufficient to protect me. But that means that I'm essentially the ant. I have no idea how the anthill works. I just follow two simple rules, and my part of the anthill stays fairly orderly. You then have a combination of this emergent network following simple rules with larger organizations, commercial firms that do the defense of the web, that when they find a virus, they immediately jump on it, write the counter-viral software, and disseminate it through their servers to all the people who are subscribers. So it's a combination, and then within individual firms have very expensive systems to protect proprietary data. So this is, every aspect of society is joining together to defend the internet. That's what we're going to need against the next generation of threat, which is the super-empowered individual or small group. It's going to have to be all of society will have to respond.
Well, we certainly have a lot of resources in our society, but does the government have the resources to produce the technology or to use the technology that's necessary to defeat our opponents?
Now, which set of opponents?
Well, let's say jihadists and terrorists. You said, I think you've written that you think jihadists are more sophisticated and technologically savvy than we are.
They make better use of commercially available technology. That doesn't mean more technologically savvy. What they have done is make use of car door openers. They've got longer range phones in Iraq that is up to 10 miles from your base station. You're talking to your base station. Garage door openers with 100,000 codes on them. All of those sorts of things are simply commercial, and so they've made it. And that's why the trend, the dangerous trend, is we're going from these large insurgencies down to super-empowered small groups or even individuals who use off-the-shelf technology to attack a government. First example of that might be the anthrax attack on Capitol Hill. This couldn't have been more than one or at most two people, or the FBI would have found them. Off-the-shelf technology, because nobody's missing anything from any of the super sophisticated labs. Attacking for a cause, not a nation. We don't know what that cause was. And he actually went after the U.S. government. That's a trend line that now, with the greater empowerment of biological sciences, these people become much more powerful and much more dangerous. So the government will never find all these guys, and that's where we need an all-of-society defense. Another all-of-society defense that we've used for years has been the public health system. Follow simple rules. Get your flu shot. If you're sick, stay home. The Japanese have a more sophisticated system. If you have a cold, you put on a HEPA filter mask. Because of the intense crowding in Japan, that significantly reduces. Simple rules like that make every citizen part of the defense system.
Wash your hands regularly.
Wash your hands. Very simple rules. Everybody can do them. The key is that before one of these attacks, we have to establish what those simple rules will be, make sure they're well publicized, and that we speak with a coherent voice. First round of the anthrax attack, we got 3 or 4 different opinions from 3 or 4 different government agencies, sometimes several from the federal government level, telling you what to do. That confused the population.
So we were in disarray at that
Yes.
point.
One of
Is
the
it
good
better
things-
now? Do you think we've improved
Yes,
since
I think
2001?
I think a couple things have helped us. One was the anthrax attack itself. Second was the SARS scare. We thought through some things on SARS that were very, very important. We are now investing in things, but nowhere near the way we should be. We're spending huge, huge amounts on military defense, on missile defense. Very, very low probability event, low probability, high impact, but also difficult to pull off. And almost nothing on, relatively nothing on public health.
And what about intelligence? You've criticized our intelligence as being too bureaucratic and diverse and non-communicative.
We still have enormous problems in that area. We have it goes back to your bureaucratic and personnel structures. The personnel structures are all based on the 1900 Elia Root reforms for the Department of War. So we're running essentially a personnel system based in 1900. We're trying to make it work in 2007. That's a recipe for disaster.
And in your criticism of the intelligence agencies, you say that our bureaucracy is vertical, and you thought that was a weakness.
It's an enormous weakness.
And what do you mean by that?
I think anybody who's worked inside the bureaucracy, particularly in the Pentagon, knows the two most famous sayings are, stay in your box, that's not in your lane. I think some business people will recognize that too.
Not my field.
Okay, not in your field. So information travels vertically in a bureaucracy. All the information travels to the top, a decision is made, and then it travels back down the chain. That is inherently a waste of ability to reach out, native intelligence. It's the lateral connections where you find information that's surprising. Now, that can be done in a bureaucracy if the people at the top give mission-type orders and guidance and say, go out and find this information. But that's not the way our system works. Our system does not get those type of people to the top because that's not a route to success in the way we operate.
Okay, T.X. Hammes. Colonel Hammes, I have a question for you. You're the author of The Sling and the Stone, War in the 21st Century. Are we losing out to the terrorists in cyberspace? What's the answer?
No.
No.
They are using it as a tool. They're making very effective use of it as a tool, but they're not per se winning the battle in cyberspace. What they are doing is leveraging cyberspace to win fights in the real world, to change opinion, to shift the dominant opinion in a community or an area overseas.
Well, let's hope they don't succeed. T.X. Hammes, thank you for coming by.
You.
This was really quite marvelous. And thank you for coming by. Please tune in next week for more on the digital age, for the digital age. I'm Jim Zirin. Thank you, and all the best. Good night.